Good afternoon. It's just turned 3:30. I'd just like to know that recording has just started. So welcome to the production PDC. Item 1 on the agenda is apologies for absence.
Apologies from Councillors Erica Kirshner, Kelly Roberts and Leslie Walton.
Any disclosures of personal or prejudicial interest? No, none. Item 3 then is to approve and sign the minutes of the previous meeting as a correct record, and this was held on the 26th of July. 3 pages. Can I go through the pages one at a time? Page 1, page 2, page 3. Somebody move minutes?
Move, Chair.
Thank you. I'm going to move Linda, secretary. Thank you very much. Item 4 is an update from Anthony on their corporate personal debt recovery policy. This is the update after our first workshop we had in August. So Anthony, do you want a quick overview of that workshop?
Thank you, Chair, and good afternoon, everybody. As you all be aware, we held the corporate personal debt recovery policy workshop following the last PDC meeting. PDC members were invited to attend that meeting along with officers from services involved in debt recovery processes across the council. The purpose of the workshop was to present the general principles that we are in the process of developing in terms of the debt recovery policy. We had good representation from services across the council. That was including property services, housing and public health, revenues and benefits, legal and democratic services, and financial services. The general principles of the draft policy that we're working on currently was met generally with positive responses from various services. But as you can imagine, many services have various commitments and legal objectives that they have to meet in their processes of debt recovery. So there are a number of kind of details to work out for each of the services as we develop the policy. And so the next steps is that we, with the services, to look at the specifics for each of the services and work that into the policy underneath an agreed set of general principles that would apply to the whole authority and set up how we go about supporting people over the council.
Right, thank you, Anthony. Is that it?
That's it, unless there are any questions.
I'm going to ask that in case you disappear. So has anybody got any comments to make on the workshop that took place in August? If not, I was looking at the presentation, and that would be the ideal introduction and first couple of steps of the policy before we go into detail. And I'd like to, I've got a couple of suggestions. One is that we have further workshops to look at the procedures that we have in place at the moment with regards to all personal debt that is owed to the council. And where possible, like Anthony did mention, that some of them may have certain legislation that we can't touch. But out of them, we could pick up best practice, which we could use across the board. But until we get these presentations, we won't know. So before setting up this the workshops, can I ask committee to agree, first of all, that we move the start of this committee from 3:30 to 3 o'clock. And what I intend doing then is every week we have a workshop that will follow this meeting. We meet at 3, we finish at about 4, so the agenda won't be large, and then we go into the workshop. Because when we go into the workshop, we've got to kick Jeremy out of the room, because democratic services are not involved with workshops. So I don't know if you agree with that sort of the way we move forward, other than putting a second day in the month to do a workshop. So I don't know if anybody's got any feelings on that. No? No, hang on. Christine?
Just sounds sensible, Chair. Just sounds sensible.
Peter?
I agree as well with Christine. I think it's a sensible way to proceed. Yeah.
Thank you very much for that. So the point is now, Jeremy has got to ask every person. We've agreed. Oh, sorry, Linda, anybody on that then?
Only to say that I agreed as well. It seems sensible to do that rather than get a second meeting.
Yeah, so Jeremy now is going to email the people that are not here, because I think the rule is if one says no, then we cannot go to 3 o'clock. So we've all agreed here, because nobody has shown anything else. So Jeremy then will have to email the 3 apologies and anybody else is missing from the meeting. And if we get back that we do go to a 3 o'clock, then I'm suggesting that at our next meeting at 4 o'clock we'll have a workshop. I spoke to Jeremy. We can arrange this workshop for 3:45, and if our meeting finishes at 3:50, we can go straight into it, rather than arrange the meeting for 4 o'clock and we sit around for 10 minutes before we can access the second meeting. But we can access it any time after 3:45. So that's the intention, and at that meeting, I will be looking to invite. We're looking to invite the rent arrears recovery and council tax. I think just the 2. If you get any more, then we'll be going on very, very late. So I think we'll do those 2 to start with, see what we do as a council, and then we'll move forward. There may be something out of rent arrears. We say, well, why don't the council tax do that, and vice versa. So so if everybody agrees that that's the way we proceed, then in the next meeting we'll have a workshop straight after this PDC. Okay, there's nothing else in that. And Anthony, you'll be arranging a workshop, yes?
Yes, Chair, happy to do that.
There we are. Thank you very much. So 5 is the benefit take-up. And I think the report that you got in front of you is to provide the committee with information about the problems with claiming benefits and the reasons for underclaiming, and to identify future priorities in terms of increasing benefit take-up. This report first came to this committee in February of this year. I know Jane Storer took it, but she's not at the meeting. I think Anthony, you were taking it?
Jane.
I am actually.
Yeah. Is that?
Yeah.
That's where I can hear a bit of a relief coming out of Anthony.
I was supposed to be on leave, but I cancelled. Purposely to come here. No, I didn't. No,
No, we'll say that. We'll say that. Okay, Jane, sorry, was.
Right. Okay. Yeah. So underclaiming benefits is a massive issue across the whole of the UK. And the government they can identify some people who are not claiming the means tested benefit, but there's hardly any publicity around it. So that's one of the issues. And there's a lot of reasons why people underclaim benefit, from not knowing, from not understanding, from getting just worn down by the system. So our job within the welfare rights team is to try and promote awareness of benefits. We're a small team, as you know, and we're what's called a second tier team as in the main. So that means that we support individuals that are providing a front-facing service. So we do a lot of training of support workers, social workers, to get them more benefit aware. We do that by an advice line, which we run 3 times a week for them to access, so we can sort of listen to what their problems are, their queries for their clients, and take them through the whole process. We do appeal representation, and we also provide policy advice, reporting back on consultation and documents, and we're members of National Association of Welfare Rights Advisors and the Welfare Rights Advisors Cymru. We've also got a small provision of first tier advice, welfare benefits advice, and they're attached to the local area coordinators and into the employability teams. So we can work directly with members of the public, providing they come via employability, so they're seeking help getting back into work, or the local area coordinators have identified somebody who needs more of a holding hands approach to them because the benefits are quite complex. So what we're seeing from the local area coordinators is people with quite significant mental health problems and learning disabilities that don't meet the criteria for social services intervention, but nonetheless they're not capable or able to access advice services such as Citizens Advice or Age Cymru or the Carers Centre. So hopefully, like what we're trying to do is to promote benefits that way, and then sometimes we undertake what's called benefit take-up campaigns. So the one that we're coordinating at the moment is pension credit, and partly because we can use housing benefit and council tax revenues data to identify potential people who are not claiming pension credit when the information that we hold on them identifies that they should be entitled. This take-up campaign's been ongoing since just before Christmas, and we're working in partnership with Citizens Advice, Swansea Carers Centre, Care and Repair Western Bay, and Neath Port Talbot Welfare Rights. Take-up has been quite slow, and it's disappointing actually. Normally for the take-up campaign it takes about 3 months to bed in, for information to get out there, for people to realise what we can do for them, and then from about 3 months onwards then it sort of takes off. It's never taken off, which is quite not shocking but disappointing really, because government's figures again estimate that 2 in 5 pensioners not claiming pension credit when they're entitled to, but we know that's actually more because there's a lot of other benefits such as disability benefits and carers allowance that should they have claimed those benefits it would bring them into entitlement to pension credit for the very first time. So the government estimate 2 in 5, so those are the ones that they can identify, but there's a larger group of individuals who would qualify if they had all their other benefits checked as well. So as I said, it has been quite slow. We're doing another publicity campaign now. September, October is generally a very good time to do a take-up campaign, and that's because like the summer months are sort of over, people are staying in more, it's coming up to Christmas, so people sort of have a bit more time to sort of look at their situation. One of the reasons why I think it might have been a bit slower than normal is because of the pandemic, is because people weren't going out to their clubs, and especially the older groups, you know, like we'd be going around talking, you know, going to their luncheon clubs, doing sort of talks, and that's how take-up campaigns work for, especially for people, older people, is word of mouth. So that's what we're doing at the moment. We're going to have an article in the Evening Post. There's going to be a lot of information spread across social media, e-bulletins. I've contacted all the social housing, and they're going to do newsletters and stuff for their tenants. We're looking at our policy within the local authority about housing benefit and council tax reduction, sharing the data actually with us so we can make more of a personal approach and contact the individuals that have been identified. And we're working on that at the moment. So when I wrote this report, so far, what we had done was I'm just trying to look at the figures that are actually in the report. So what we have done is we've raised around about £781.70 per week in disability benefits. That is quite a lot of money because the majority of those claimants wouldn't have qualified for pension credit had they not got a disability benefit. So we've raised about £10,492.45 per week across Swansea, Neathport, Albert for people. And as we know, for every £1 a week raised in benefit income, the multiplier effect kicks in, and that is actually worth £4 to the local economy. So we're going to concentrate on the pension credit take-up campaign up until Christmas. We think, we need to get pensioners looking at their entitlement. We need to promote this as much as possible. As I said, we're not just looking at pension credit, we'll be looking at all their other benefits as well. So we'll be looking at council tax reduction, housing benefit, underlying entitlement to carers allowance, and the disability benefits. Apart from that take-up campaign, we're also involved in, we have been involved, I don't know whether you've heard about the Dangost Training. So this is training that's been commissioned by Welsh Government to provide benefit awareness to people working across Wales. So Swansea Welfare Rights team have been providing training on behalf of Welsh Government to deliver these courses. The Children's Society have also developed a leaflet. It's called Worrying About Money, and again it's looking at sort of debt and benefits and where people can go for help. We're part of the Advice Regional Network, and they're looking at a referral system of how best to meet people's needs in relation to benefits and debt. And sorry, there was another thing that was in my head and it's just gone completely out of it. Sorry, it'll come back to me now in a minute. All I can say is we're really busy. Has anybody got any questions?
Anybody got anything for Derek? Can't see any hands up. Linda? Oh, sorry.
Just Christine first or whatever, I don't mind.
Okay, ladies first, Christine.
Thank you, Chair. I just wanted to say thank you, Jane, for that, and indeed Anthony. I used to work in Department of Health and Social Security many years ago, and even then I think there were, especially older people, who wouldn't or couldn't claim the benefits to which they were entitled. And I think even though it may be slow, as you say, Jane, it's definitely worthwhile doing this, because every person who claims that the benefits they're entitled to, it's a step in the right direction, clearly. I was just wondering whether it would be worthwhile contacting the town and community councils in City and County of Swansea. I know they're not all over the our area, but certainly most, if not all of them, have got newsletters, web pages, meetings, all kinds of things, and it would just be worthwhile, I think, using any avenues you can to send the message further. And I'm just thinking of our own, for example, in the Lacha Welfare Hall, we've got contacts with the local pensioner groups. They come to us for grants, and all kinds. So there are links there that are worth exploiting, I think. It's great that the local area coordinators are involved as well, because I think they're a very good door to come into to this. But I just thought I'd mention the town and community councils. They may be good allies for us.
Yeah, I have contacted, as I say, for social media, the groups that I know of, and asked administrators to put information on those groups. It was back in the summer, but we're revisiting there again. So yes, thank you. I'll take that up.
Thank you, Christine. Linda?
Yeah, great. Thanks, and thanks to Anthony, particularly particular to Jane for that, for the report. Really useful. I think obviously if people are entitled to benefits, we need to go that last mile to make sure they get that appropriate help. And as Christine said, elderly people very often just won't do that because they think there's a stigma around it sometimes, as you said in your report. And also you've got an issue where people are frightened to do it. And both of those things are not acceptable. Really, we've got to help them get over that and really help them get in. I've certainly had people contact me as councillor about issues, and I took one of them to the minister myself, and I met him up in London, in Westminster, which is something obviously our MPs can do. And we've got 3 MPs in Westminster, in the Swansea area, and they have an opportunity to knock on the minister's door quite more easily than I can, being here. But the other thing, Christine mentioned local councils. You could also, as you know, local social media as well, because most areas have got a social media covering that area, and it may be something the councillors could do to put that in. I know in my case we've just had an area coordinator appointed, who Sarah, who's actually excellent, and I've been through with her a lot of the events that are going on involving elderly people as well. So she has got that link, and I've given her all the contacts so they can actually move that forward. But thank you both.
Okay.
Thank you, Linda. I'm just looking at this. Are we looking to do a benefit take-up strategy, or are we looking to introduce a policy? Slightly 2 different things there. A policy is something more likely that if we adopt, for example, that Jane said about once or twice a year, we will put something out in the Evening Post. Well, that could be our policy, because benefit take-up is not going to go away. This is with us for years, and it's how do we reach these people? We as a council, because I think benefit take-up goes hand in hand policy we were looking at before with debt recovery. I think it all goes together. So how then do we get this as a policy, and that goes out then? It's on a policy will be on our website, and that will be information for people, because what we say now, we talk to different areas like citizens advice bureau, and we talk to these people, but we're not talking to the individuals. So we've got to reach people, and we've got to reach them in a way where they're confident to pick up the phone to talk to somebody. Anthony, I can see you've got your hand up there. Don't tell me now.
Not to provide necessarily an answer to that question, but just to put in context that the PDC will have sight and be aware that we are starting a process of revision of the council's current tackling poverty strategy. As part of that strategy, income maximisation, financial inclusion, benefit take-up is already encompassed as a key element within that strategy. So just to raise that in terms of the kind of wider context of where that sits from a strategy perspective.
So the next question I was going to ask her, Jane, is where do we go from here?
Sorry, it's home time. School home time. Right, okay. We do have a web page, that covers benefits for Swansea Council. And another thing I did want to say is that wherever we see like an issue within the local authority, then we work together with the council departments. So an example that I can provide for that is housing benefits interpretation of the guidance around the second bedroom and evidence. We worked with housing benefits, and now it's an easier system for clients. But as I said, we've got the benefit pages on the council website where people can see, and it comes down to articles in the Evening Post. if there is something that we want to get out to make people more aware of, then yes, we will. But, you know, like take-up campaigns are few and far between in our organisation because we are quite a small unit. We don't really have capacity or resources to deal with take-up campaigns all the time, because it's quite intricate and time-consuming work.
Christine? Have we disappeared, Christine? Yes.
Sorry.
Okay, you're back.
That was a cunning plan to, you know, give me an extra 15 seconds to think about what I was going to say. No, not really. What Jane just said about them not having the resources to do a take-up plan, take-up campaign as often maybe as they would like, as often as maybe they'd need to. I mean, that's clearly something that is on the policy side. We're the Policy Development Committee for Poverty, and it maybe should be something that's coming out of the of this committee to say, well, they should have the resources to do benefit take-up campaigns. If it's such a good thing, we should absolutely, as a council, put our money where, or put their money where our mouths are, you know. So there's that really. And the other thing, and I'm not sure whether I've mentioned it before in this context, but certainly we write to every household once a year, at least, when we send out the council tax bills. And there may be, I seem to remember, you know, saying something when it was too late that year to do anything. But certainly there's an opportunity there to write to every household and to include something. We're writing out to them saying, you owe us this money. But at the same time, you or your parents or your grandparents may be entitled to pension credits, and you should check to see whether they are or not. Just a thought, that's all, Chair. Thank you.
Yeah. Well, thank you, Christine. I was thinking of down the same lines, is we will come up with Jane's suggestion with a policy. The policy will say, this is what we are going to do. That's not the end of it. It goes to the cabinet member, and for the cabinet member to agree with that, he has got to come up with the funding. So we are doing our job saying we want a policy. It doesn't mean it's going to be the policy, because it goes to the cabinet member, it goes to cabinet, and if it needs extra funding, then they either find the extra funding or they kick it a touch. But we shouldn't be saying, oh, well, we're not going to do this because we don't think there's funding there, but because we don't know. So, Jane, is it all right now you go back and try and get something? You know, I'll talk to you during the weeks, and then we can put something together which looks like a policy on benefit take-up, like the things you've mentioned. Maybe all the LACs need training. Well, there's a cost to that. Because to be quite honest, it's the LACs that talk to a lot of the elderly and the other people within our community who need help. And they are tremendous at this moment in time, because we've got quite a lot of area coordinators at this moment in time. And this is the first contact, and they will give people confidence to get in touch with certain people for benefits. But we've got to make the first step. We've got to teach the LACs, we've got to teach other people. And like you said, Christine, that's not cheap. So are you with me, Jane, or am I...
I was just, that is part of our remit, is training. So we do work quite closely with the local area coordinators. So they have access to our advice line, and they come on our training, you know, our courses. So one of our welfare rights advisors is attached to the local area coordinators team, and then the coordinators have access to the rest of our core team that provides second tier. So the LACs should have quite a good network of support, because they can come onto our training to identify and build their confidence up in welfare benefits and identifying benefit entitlements. Their remit is to try and make people more resilient and to take action on their own. So they will direct people to go to citizens advice or to the carers centre, you know, and to use the resources that are out there. And then where that person hasn't got the capacity, then they've got access to their own welfare rights advisors to do referrals to. So, you know, that is our remit, is to try and increase awareness and capacity of the workforce of Swansea. And that's how we do it, through training and through our advice line and through joint appointments for complex casework and appeal representation.
Yeah.
It's sorry.
Oh, I'm sorry.
It's, you know, like, so for benefit, you know, if you want, you know, a first tier welfare rights advice fund, you know, funding for the local authority that can then sort of do benefit taker campaigns as and when, then that's what needs the funding.
Yeah, but until we get put a policy together which says all this, it won't go any further. We just carry on as we are. If we're happy the way things are going, or we think we can improve it. Okay,
I'm more than happy to put a policy together to look for more funding for more welfare rights advisors.
And we'll put something together, and we'll say for next month, but within the next couple of months, and then you come back to us, have a look at it to see whether it can come straight to the committee or whether it's got to go to a workshop. I bow to Craig's advice on that one. So, but anyway, that's when we take this forward.
Yeah, I was just, the one thing that I had forgotten to say as well is that we have got another welfare rights advisor, and that's being funded through the housing support grant. So they'll be attached to the housing side of it. So we haven't quite worked out exactly where they'll sit at the moment, but they'll probably be providing support to the housing team, so welfare rights advice as well. So many have we got in the welfare rights team? Well, now you're going to ask me. There's 10 of us, 11 of us at the moment. Some of them are part-time. So we've got two part-time workers attached to the local area coordinators, one full-time attached to employability. And then we've got 3 part-time and 1 full-time, 2 full-time, which are the core team. So they're the ones that do the advice line, the appeal representation and the training. There's myself then, and then we've got a project and finance officer that does sort of all our sort of budgeting and admin work.
Great, thank you, Jo.
Yeah, Phil, just another option that's available to the committee is you could also write to the cabinet member on behalf of the committee to sort of outline sort of recommendations, and then you could get some feedback in terms of then shaping that scope of the policy. It could, for example, be around that sort of wider tackling poverty strategy that Anthony mentioned, but it could be sort of a shorter way of sort of trying to get some interest or get some initial feedback from the cabinet member and cabinet about the appetite for this type of policy. Just so you're aware that that's an option as well.
Yeah, that could be the first option, which would cut out a lot of work in between.
Yes, yeah.
Yeah, thank you. Right, I can't see anybody dancing. Right, thank you for that, Jo, Jane and Jo. So we know where we're going to move forward on this. We'll have a chat with the cabinet member first of all, and then see what happens. Okay, thank you very much. And on to the next item, which is fairness in green health, and this is Deb Hill.
Yeah, thank you, Chair. Apologies from Paul Mellor. He asked me to cover this report as he had to take annual leave today. So, as you know, the report was prepared by a working group of this PDC, and it highlights the need to give greater priority to the deprived areas when allocating resources for future greening initiatives. And just as a bit of background, I mean, we know the positive benefits to mental and physical health and well-being of having access to green spaces and nature, and they're very well evidenced. and the importance of being able to access quality green spaces, say within walking distance of where people live, has become particularly apparent during the recent COVID lockdowns. We are lucky in Swansea, we've got a wide range of parks and wildlife sites and green spaces, but they're not equally accessible to all, with some of our most deprived communities being the most deprived of quality green space. So this report outlines 3 possible options to help address this deficiency or inequity in provision of access to green space. Just to say that the decisions that we make regarding the allocation of resources and grant funding for nature conservation, nature recovery, green infrastructure, take a number of factors into account to ensure that the work that we do will achieve the greatest ecological resistance, provide the most multiple ecosystem service benefits, and resilience to climate change. So the kind of things that we would look at is where there are gaps in connectivity of green space, where are there areas that are suffering from flooding or poor air quality, lack of shelter or shade, or lacking in biodiversity. And we would target those areas alongside those. We'd also take account of the deprivation factor that I spoke of earlier. Obviously, where we've got grant aid for schemes, we have to comply with specific conditions. So if it's a grant for the AONB, we can only spend that in Gower. Equally, many grant funds actually specifically highlight the need to focus on deprived urban communities. In particular, we've got 3 grants this year, which all state that that should be a focus of the funding spend. So Appendix A of the report proposes that wherever possible, and I would add and appropriate, priority for future greening should be given to the most deprived areas based on the WIMD index. More specifically, it proposes a policy statement and a set of objectives or actions, which include Swansea aims to develop high quality multifunctional green infrastructure and natural green space in deprived areas, to develop resilience to climate change and its impact on deprived areas through nature-based solutions, promote improved access to green space, to equalise access to high quality green environments, assess all relevant incoming resources and to be deployed to benefit deprived areas and do so unless demonstrably impossible. Well, I think maybe again, perhaps it's where it's appropriate as well as being possible. Further the aims of this policy by seeking collaboration with partners and apply a green fairness lens to strategic council policy developments and decisions. I think that's quite an important action or objective there. And obviously, you know, there's others, including to identify and map opportunities for improvement. And then it further proposes that the policy will be implemented through a 3-year action plan to be reviewed annually. Now, many of the actions and the objectives outlined in the draft policy statement are already being delivered through existing and future council plans, programmes and strategies, such as the Green Infrastructure Strategy, the Nature Recovery Action Plan, Corporate Objective for Natural Resources and Biodiversity, the PSB's objective working with nature, and the Climate Change Action Plan and the Welsh Housing Quality Standard Programme. So the Poverty Reduction Committee is asked to consider 3 possible options in relation to the next steps in the development of a fairness in green health policy. And following that decision, a further report will be brought back to the PDC prior to any draft policy being submitted to Cabinet. So the 3 options which are covered in the report: option 1, a standalone policy to be adopted corporately with specific actions and high visibility. Obviously, that will require resources in terms of delivery, monitoring and reporting. The second option is that the policy is integrated as an objective into existing strategies and future strategies and plans. So the monitoring and the reporting would be through existing mechanisms. However, obviously, as it wouldn't be a standalone policy and there'd be less visibility. But this issue could be overcome if green fairness was monitored and reported through the Climate Change Strategy and Nature Programme Board and the Wellbeing Objective on the biodiversity. and or if green fairness was made one of the requirements of the integrated impact assessment process. The third option is the hybrid option, which still has a standalone policy stating the council's intent to be delivered still through the existing strategies. So that would avoid the additional reporting and monitoring requirement and double handling. However, that would still need some resource to obviously draft the policy and consult. So that's kind of the three options that are being put on the table for decision. I don't know if Joe Portwood wants to come in and highlight any of the kind of implications of those three options from a policy point of view, Joe.
No, I think you've outlined them sort of very clearly, Deb. I think there are sort of three sort of clear options for the committee to consider, and bearing in mind, you know, the advice that probably from the directorate and the service that's going to be implementing it in terms of the resource that's available. So I think it's really for the committee now to discuss and come up with an option as a way forward.
Thank you, Chair. Well, obviously this issue, will come as no surprise to members, is something that I'm particularly interested in. And of course, this committee has been looking at this issue for what, 3 years possibly now? Joe is nodding, I hope that's right. And I'd like to pay tribute, if I may, first of all, to Councillor Mary Sherwood, who was instrumental, I believe, in setting this whole process in motion. And I just hope that we can draw it rapidly towards some kind of decision and conclusion. And thank you, first of all, to Deb Hill then for what I thought was an excellent summary of the issue and the choices that we as a committee in terms of developing a policy are required to make. I mean, in terms of the Appendix A, first of all, the draft strategy document, just draw attention to paragraph 1.5, the astonishing difference in terms of life expectancy as people living in the most deprived areas and those living in the least deprived areas. 12 years, I think it is for male adults, and even more astonishingly, 23 years estimated in terms of a healthy life expectancy. That is awful, that is deplorable, and we need obviously to be active in relation to that. And of course, it's well established. I've got here a report from the Royal College of Physicians looking at the impact on health, human health, in terms of a good green environment as to one that isn't. And again, making the point that the life expectancy gap nationwide, it was quoted here, this is a 2016 report, of 10 years as between most and least deprived. It's clearly significant, whatever figure we take. So quite clearly, green infrastructure is a major contributor to human health and well-being, quite apart from the obvious benefits to biodiversity and so forth. So when I came to look at this document and the accompanying report that Deb has introduced, I had to ask myself, is this a report about the environment, or is this a report about poverty? And I struggled with this, but I've come to the conclusion this is a report about poverty, and therefore we need to give that the priority, I think, in terms of thinking about how we take the matter forward. Much against my inclination, my natural inclination was, gosh, this is another report on environment, let's promote it. But this is a report which is saying, how can the environment benefit people, and in particular, how can it benefit the most deprived of people in our Swansea community? Incidentally, I should also report that I am a member of the task group working on the Working with Nature task for the PSB. I don't think that constitutes a personal interest, but if it is, perhaps somebody will tell me. But I then came on to look at the three options in the report that Deb has summarised. And I think if we take the view, taking her point about cost, resource, time and so forth, I would rule out number one, the standalone policy. I don't think we need a standalone policy on this issue. We then got options 2 and 3, which one can struggle with a little as to differentiating between them. My initial inclination was to go for option 2, because it recognises, as Deb has said, that we are doing many of these things already, and we can do them more, and we can build in a priority, if you like, for residents in deprived areas in terms of allocation of resource when it's available and when it's practicable and when it's appropriate to do that. But then I also came to the conclusion on reflection, lying awake in bed last night, as I often do, that the hybrid approach might be the best way to take this matter forward, because I'm conscious of the point that is made in relation to option 2, quote, that it's less visible from the poverty perspective. And I think it's important that as a council we are seen to be, on this occasion, using greening as a priority, as a tool to help people in less deprived, in the most deprived areas. And so I think we should see this as a positive tool for countering poverty. So that takes me to the conclusion that I would like to suggest to this committee, that we adopt whatever is meant by the hybrid policy. And I think what is meant by that is everything in option 2, including provision for a reference to, in the integrated impact assessment of wellbeing objectives for biodiversity. But then we build into a recognition of the fact that there is a standalone element for this in terms of people in the most deprived areas, and that where it is relevant, possible and practicable, people in those areas will be given priority. And I've got one, I represent this great big ward of Sketty. Everybody thinks Sketty is prosperous and wonderful. Well, a lot of it is wonderful and a lot of it is prosperous, but a lot of it is deprived. And it's in those people in those areas who need more support. The people in the most prosperous parts of the ward, as they have done, for example, in Derwent Valley, have actually paid for trees to be planted along their road. I'm not going to ask the people of Sketty Park to pay for trees to be planted around their area, but clearly they ought to be a priority. They need more trees, they need more green space. And that's an example, I think, that as resources become available, and subject to the practicability of being able to do it, i.e. space being available, then we should want to give priority. So my recommendation to the committee is to take on option 3, recognising that option 2 is absorbed within it. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Christine.
Sorry, I was just going to mention it's in the report, just the importance really of making sure that supplementary planning guidance on biodiversity actually captures this issue as well, and the residential development developers guide. It's in my mind at the moment because there's an estate of houses being built in my ward, the biggest estate that's happened in my tiny ward for many years. And I went today to look at the site, and of course they will be travelling through what is our council estate, one of our areas of deprivation within Lower Lacher, to get to the estate. And the way that they're going to be able to do that is to cut down mature trees to extend the road into the estate. Now, when you look at stuff that comes up in front, development in Swansea, certainly trees and hedges are often casualties of development. So maybe there's something a little stronger that we need to say about that, and to make sure that it's included in the supplementary planning guidance, so that everybody who, no matter where across the city and county of Swansea, if you're making changes to the environment, that you most definitely have to take into account the natural world then.
Thank you, Chris.
Great, thanks, Chair. Yeah, I think when you're involved with this sort of policy in greening areas, what you need to do is to take local people with you as well, because so often, and we've all seen it around the city in different areas, you see trees going in and they look fantastic. A few weeks later, they've been snapped. And, you know, my heart goes out. I think, gosh, you know, it really is, you know, not good enough. But you just need to get that local buy-in from those people, because without that, it just won't work. And that is quite key to it. I went to a site with one of the Senedd members about 5 or 6 years ago to Penrhys in the Rhondda, which is pretty deprived. And they had trialed a number of things over the years to get people involved with growing vegetables and so on. And then when they started to involve people in it, it was a great success. But you do need to get that, as I say, that involvement. Otherwise, it won't work. The other thing I would say is that even in sort of in my own ward, Bishopston, a lot of the people there are asset rich but cash poor. And a lot of people who have got children in the comprehensive school, their mortgages are so massive that they've got very little cash left to spend, and so on. So you get poverty in all parts of Swansea, but obviously in a slightly different way.
Thank you. Raglan?
Thanks, Chair. I was wondering whether any figures have been put on. People are talking about resources, etc., being needed for the 3 options. I wondered whether any work had been done trying to put a figure on what exactly we were talking about.
Deb, can you answer that?
Yeah, not as far as I'm aware, but obviously, you know, all of the options will require some resources. I think perhaps Joe can help me out here as well. But if we're going for a sort of a policy backed up by implementation through existing strategies, then obviously there's you know, a bit of a saving in terms of not double reporting, because we have to report on those strategies in any case, and we can just pick out the relevant bits that apply to the policy. But I think in actually drafting the policy, there probably is some resource needed for consultation and you know, writing a report to go with it. I don't know, Joe, if you can add to that.
Yeah. So I think there'd be a small amount of resource up front to do an integrated impact assessment, to write reports for Cabinet, etc., and obviously then to monitor the policy going forward. But as Deb mentioned, I think if you can make use of existing strategies and mechanisms, then all the better, really. However, I do sort of, you know, agree with Peter's approach. This is a difficult area of work because it's spanning 2 areas, the green sort of infrastructure with poverty, which traditionally, you know, haven't necessarily come together. So yes, it has been a long time in development, but I think it's probably necessary to do that, because it is quite an innovative piece of work. So it is sort of trying to push those boundaries forward in terms of integration. I think it'd probably be down to Martin, would it, Deb, to come back with a sort of clearer costing about officer time, because I think it would be important, obviously, for his directorate and that service to take this forward in terms of the monitoring of it, because they will be delivering that policy.
Yeah, thanks, Joan. I was just going to add to that you know, picking upon Councillor Jones's point, that absolutely we need to work with communities to ensure that, you know, they're being properly engaged in any plans for new planting or biodiversity works within their area. And, you know, we have got some temporary grant funded posts that will enable us to do a bit more of that kind of work. But I think it's really important as well that we link in more closely with the area coordinators and work together to you know, link into the local communities that they're working with.
Is that a new hand or is it over?
Sorry, Kerry, what's that to then?
I believe it is a legacy hand, but
Yes.
in the feedback there, nobody mentioned planning and development. That's all.
Yeah, take that on board, because
Yeah. Okay. Fair enough then. I'm off. Right.
Okay, thanks. Because the on when I mentioned trees getting damaged, there was an issue in Bishopswood where trees were damaged, and what had actually did, I bought some oak trees from my community fund a little while. It was just before COVID, and we actually got people, some of the students from the comprehensive school down to actually plant them. So you would buy in. And I'm doing a project down there at the moment. I'm waiting for Karen, who's one of the managers down there, do some of my community fund to buy trees. She's coming back to me with a species. Because with ash dieback, we're not going to have much of a wood there, and that could be the same in a lot of parts of Swansea. And I was quite shocked to realise is that when you cut the ash tree down and you regrow it, it grows back, that tree will be diseased, which is shocking. So we're looking for some different species to put in, and I'm going to involve the comprehensive school and the primary school in actually putting those in. And that's a good way of getting sort of that sort of involvement. And as a throwaway, one other thing I'm doing is to put, and I'm working on it at the moment, an avenue of fruit trees so that the community can pick and enjoy.
Let us know when the trees are grown and the committee will come down.
Absolutely. Yeah.
Thank you for that. Just to point out, on 2.1, there are a number of policies out there. And to say half of what Peter said, that's why that drew me to the hybrid policy. So I can't, Christine's got her hand back up. Is that, did you press the button or did it just come on, Chris?
No, I was just going to highlight some of the tree planting that had gone on in my own ward, if that's the way we were going this afternoon. Because certainly like a foreshore, we've planted many small trees down there, rare sort of vintage apple trees in Park Williams, and Lyndon's right to highlight what he's done in his own ward, because there is an opportunity for all 72 or 75 if the Boundary Commission gets its way, or whatever. There is an opportunity for all councillors to do what they can within their own ward, and I know that many of us have actually done that kind of work involving the community. And we've had trees damaged when we've planted them, but that doesn't mean you give up. You just carry on and carry on and carry on, because it's far too important to be overcome by a bit of vandalism. You just keep at it. And support those trees as best you can. Yeah, that's all, Chair.
Thank you, Chris. And I don't want to go into every other ward to see what trees you've planted, because we could be half hour in Ponderlist. So back to the report. Can I say Peter moved that we go with option 3, which is the hybrid policy. So can anybody else want to say anything on that before I take a vote on it? No? So can we all agree that we will go along with the hybrid policy? Yeah, there's nobody jumping out saying no, only Christine's hand is still in. All right, Deb?
Yeah, that's lovely. Thanks very much.
Yeah. The other thing is, now we've agreed to do this, the next question would be how long would this take, so we could put it into one of the months?
Yeah, again, it comes back to resources, I guess, and who will be doing this piece of work. I wouldn't go for the next meeting for sure. Perhaps the one after.
If we put in any month, whether it's November, December, January, but that would be a point in time for somebody to come back with it. Right,
yeah.
Thank you, Chair. What I was thinking was, if we've decided to go down the hybrid route, when it actually comes to fruition and it's ready to be implemented, I still think that there's scope for having, let's call it a policy launch, so that there's a big splurge of publicity about it, so that people, residents, groups, etc., know that we are now working in this way to have a fair green policy, etc. I think there's a scope to have a blitz of publicity at the point where we implement it.
I'm not sure whether we need to also go out for consultation on a draft policy, Joe. You implied that that might be necessary?
Yes, you'd probably need to take advice from Craig and his colleagues on that. And Anthony's just been through this similar process in terms of moving forward with credit. But yes, I think there are statutory timelines in terms of consultation. There'd be an integrated impact assessment. So we might be looking at 3 or 4 months lead in time until we're ready. But yeah, we can work out that detail.
The lead on the hybrid policy. Peter, you can hand up again.
Yes, thank you, Chair. Just quickly, first of all, thank you to the committee. I think the hybrid policy is the right way to go, and I'll be interested to learn from Joe in the near future, I hope, as to whether that involves any kind of consultation process. And I would hope it doesn't, quite frankly. And the reason I say that, quite apart from saving on time and cost perhaps, is that, as Deb has rightly pointed out, we're doing these things anyway. And she and her team and others will be doing these things anyway, with or without our formal adoption of option 3 as council policy. So I would hope that where the opportunities arise in those parts of Swansea that we designate as deprived, presumably using the Welsh Index of Multiple Deprivation, that in those areas, in the light of the discussions we've had here, and even in advance, perhaps, of any formal decision taken elsewhere, that those areas can be given favourable consideration, shall I say, in whatever opportunities that might exist. And I would just like to ask Deb in conclusion, and once again, thanks, Deb, for the work that you and your team are doing. In terms of meeting a priority for giving, what are the problems in identifying areas within so-called deprived parts of Swansea where things can be done? Because again, if I just think of my own ward, Sketty Park doesn't really offer much in terms of opportunity. There are some green grass areas there that might be developed in various ways. But the actual roads themselves mostly don't have green verges. They have macadam or whatever verges. So if one were going into, for example, into a tree planting process, which would be great, it's going to be rather difficult, rather more difficult than was the case in Derwent Vale, for example. I just wonder, what are the practicalities of delivering on this process of giving priority to deprived areas? Maybe that's too difficult to answer. Deb, are you able to give any thoughts?
I think in terms of the mapping, we've pretty much already got that information. We've mapped areas which are perceived to be deficient in accessible natural green space. So it's a relatively straightforward GIS kind of process to overlay the WMD areas onto that and see where they coincide. We're also working to identify what we call demand and opportunity areas. So where there's a demand for perhaps some green infrastructure or environmental nature-based solution because there are problems with flooding or air quality, as I said before, or just to tackle the need to adapt to climate change. We've started to map those areas, and then we've also mapped opportunity areas, which are those places where there is potential to carry out tree planting or a community orchard or a wildflower garden or whatever. And that we've mapped it at a sort of county-wide scale, which is quite coarse-grained, but we are beginning to drill down to the ward level and producing what we're calling Wild About My Ward maps. And these new staff that we've just about to appoint with the grant aid will be working with communities to actually go down to that level of detail and identify areas within each ward. Now, the condition of the grant, I think it actually states it in the grant application that there will be a key focus in the urban and peri-urban area, and particularly in those deprived communities. So that would be an exercise that we can start to do hopefully over the next year or two with these additional resources that we've just had approved.
Well, that's great. Thank you, Deb, and thank you, Chair.
Very much. Make a decision on which one we're going for. So I thank Deb and Joanne for that report. Excellent. We're moving on to item 7, which is the work plan. Just another cabinet member has asked me if we could look at the community food growing policy that we haven't looked at before, but she's asking, can we put this onto next month? So at this moment in time, it'll only be that on the agenda so far, because we're trying out the new format of a working group. So I don't want to fill it up and then find out that we can't do the working group at the moment to see where we are. And once I speak to, I don't know who it is, whether it's you, Joe, or whether it's Anthony. But we'll have a chat about that. And if we could get something else in the same time, we'll put one of the businesses that we'll be waiting to bring through, if that's okay with everybody.
Yeah.
Okay.
Can I just perhaps add to that? I'm sure Joe's aware, but in Swansea there's a very active community growing network that's been in place for a number of years. So it would be, you know, great to kind of engage with them, and also the Community Orchard project, just to feed in what's going on outside of the council. And I mean, we are working closely with them to support the work that they're doing. But and just to highlight, perhaps if you're not already in touch with them, Joe, that, you know, it'd be good to engage with them as well.
Amy?
Oh, hi, afternoon. I was just wondering about future topics, and local area coordination has been mentioned twice actually in different subject areas today, and whilst not in terms of a future policy, but just wondering if it might be useful for the committee to have a bit of an update, because that now there's full county coverage, just in terms of the work and how they contribute to the wider tackling poverty agenda as well. Not suggesting for the next meeting because they've only just had full county coverage, but it's just a suggestion really in terms of the team.
Yeah, so that seems to be a good idea, Amy. Yes, we look into that. Okay, everybody happy? Okay, thank you very much. It's the end of the meeting.
Can I just tag on at the end? Sorry, it was just in relation to that final point of the policy and whether or not you will need consultation with other, well, depending. Quite simply, the point came up. I think you need to consider what is and what isn't going to be in it as per 2.1, and then perhaps someone touch base with me. Joanne, was it yourself who was dealing with that?
I help with the process, but obviously Deb it's very important in terms of it being delivered from the service perspective.
Between the three of us, let's have a meeting post this, and or you have to see, you know, as it's the preparation of it gathers some pace, and then you can see what areas fully it's going to step into, because not all of those matters in 2.1 would require it. There's maybe one or two that would, so it depends on the depth across the board. I won't bore you all with it for the moment. It's something for us to consider as things move along.
Thanks.
Okay, thank you, Craig. Is that it? Okay, thank you very much. We'll see you all next month. 25th of October.
Thank you.
Thank you.